Why do you think it's the case that so many people fight so ardently for the rights for trans women to compete in women's sports? Now, perhaps you think it's very obvious. Perhaps you think they just think that they're fighting for freedom and liberty and civil rights and things like that. And yet, I don't think that's necessarily the case, in this particular instance anyways. You see, for the trans women in women's sports issue, there's so much popular support to the contrary, as well as evidence brought up by that popular support, that makes me believe that it would be hard for them to genuinely believe these things, to actually be acting in good faith, and still persist in this argument that trans women should be able to compete with women. And yet they continue to do so anyways, so why might this be the case? I would like to put forward a theory that can be applied to a few different kinds of arguments, but it definitely fits in this case, and it's called the linchpin theory. And you can probably guess what I mean from the name, but basically, the only reason people continue to defend this idea that trans women should compete in women's sports is because it's a linchpin to their broader worldview. That if they were to lose this particular facet of the overall culture debate, of the overall debate on trans people, it would collapse or at least severely negatively alter their worldview. So in this particular instance, the linchpin is again the idea that trans women should compete in women's sports. This is important to them because they have defined trans women as being equal, 100% full stop, to a woman. So anything which would be contrary to that, which would add an asterisk to that statement that trans women are women, would be damaging to their worldview. And so you see them continue to defend what is pretty much an indefensible statement that, they are unironically saying that men should be able to compete in MMA with women, and that this is not only, safe and okay, but even beyond, it goes into being virtuous and good and, promoting a freedom and all these crazy things. But again, they are not, I guess the main problem here is when you have a linchpin such as this, these people are not debating in good faith. At least the people who are the original progenitors of these arguments are not debating in good faith. There are, of course, those people that genuinely believe the propaganda, that genuinely believe this line, but that was only conjured up because it is a linchpin, because it defends their broader worldview. So again, it's a linchpin. They don't actually believe it, at least the progenitors of the argument. They only continue to argue it because, in spite of the overwhelming popular support to the contrary, and in spite of the overwhelming evidence that side brought up, they just continue to defend it because they need to, because their worldview is dependent upon it. They may not have even, when they first brought up this issue, they might not have even seen it coming. And indeed, it probably wasn't a very important, the trans women in sports thing. It probably wasn't a very important thing when it first started. But because it's become a linchpin, it's a debate that we've been having now for years. And so this is the linchpin theory. Consider next time you see someone defending a seemingly indefensible point in debate, consider if it might not be a linchpin to their broader worldview. And, the only solution, by the way, to dealing with people once we've identified a linchpin or a potential linchpin like this, basically the only solution is to not debate with them. Because if someone is defending something because it is a linchpin, they're not debating in good faith. And anyone not debating in good faith, you should simply exit the conversation with them. That's that. And I was thinking of other examples of things that might be linchpin type arguments, and most of the ones I came up with, they were from a religious context. So instead of talking about specifics that I came up with, just think of the fact that a lot of religious debates, when people become intransigent on religious issues, it's probably because it's a linchpin issue. I mean, consider, for example, like the Shroud of Turin. I think the Catholic Church officially recognizes it as, not being the real burial shroud or whatever. But there were some people who actually believed it, some churches who actually believed it, and that was their official doctrine. And even when overwhelming evidence came out to saying that this thing was only, I think, like 500 years old, people still held to it. The Christians that had believed it, they still held to it as being 100% true, because in their minds, this thing was the real burial shroud of Jesus. And if it was proven to not be from him, then this could maybe poo-poo their entire idea of the veracity of Christianity. Now, I think that's a very silly statement, and those people shouldn't have, their faith shouldn't have been based on that anyways, but that was the case for a lot of people. So you have people still today who will defend the Shroud of Turin as legitimate because it is a linchpin to their broader faith. Yeah, and I could come up with a million more religious examples, but religion is definitely one where people have a very, very strongly held belief, and they will become intransigent on certain issues that become linchpins for the broader edifice of their faith. So, anyways, yeah, that's all. Maybe consider this linchpin theory, see if it comes up at any other points in your life, and just again use it to recognize when someone's debating in bad faith. And if they are debating in bad faith, it's no longer incumbent upon you to talk to them. So yeah, thank you for watching. Have a good day.